We have Larian's own Swen Vincke without his regaling armor, but here to talk about wonderful Baldur's Gate 3. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, Dave. Nice to be here.
We had a short little presentation. Let's say it went as well as D&D can be expected. One thing that I think a lot of people are curious about, because you're going the early access route for Baldur's Gate 3, how many hours of content are players going to have to toy with when it releases in early access?
It can be quite a lot already. I don't have an exact number, but I think you can. I don't want to pinpoint a number because otherwise I will be quoted on it, but it's sufficient. You'll be busy. You can compare it, I think, to Divinity Original Sin 2's amount of content, and probably more than that's going to be in there.
That's at early access, or that's what you're aiming for?
No, that's at early access. The actual complete game is going to be much bigger than that.
So what state will the core campaign be in when you hit that maybe early access date?
So you'll have what we call the first act, or large parts of the first act. Maybe we'll have to cut some things out, depending on where we are with our development schedule. But you will be able to play through a couple of, let's call them big quest lines that are present in there. There's a whole bunch of subquests, a whole bunch of tangent story beats that you'll be able to explore. I mean, like when I'm saying being able to play through a couple of core quest lines, I'm talking about main story paths, which take easily 15 to 20 hours. So you'll be able to explore all kinds of things. You'll be able to go to the Underdark. You'll be able to visit various overland places. You will be able to play as a warlock. You'll be able to play as wizard, fighter, ranger. I'm forgetting one. And there's 6 classes that you can play as in the beginning, and you will have several subclasses for those. And there'll be different races that will be present also, so a good portion actually. And you'll be able to play up to a certain level cap, but we're still trying to get a handle of exactly what is going to be in there. And we're reserving the right to cut some things because, as we explained, the development right now is not ideal because not everybody is in the office, so working from home does slow down things.
And after the first early access release, how are you aiming to grow the experience with each update? By
adding more stuff and improving it, and then reacting to what the community is telling us. So that's pretty much been our early access paths in the past also. So we'll release more things. We'll release more classes. We'll release probably extra origin stories, maybe separate regions if we don't put everything in there on the early access date for Act 1. And then you'll see more and more features come online, more mechanics, user interface will be going through changes. So pretty much everything that you would expect us to do during early access will be happening for this game.
Do you have a content goal in relation to 5th edition? I know some people are hoping for the whole player's handbook of 5th edition to be represented. Is that the end goal, getting all of 5th ed in, or do you have another this is when it's done sort of thing?
A good portion of that. I mean, there are things that we're not putting in, but there's a lot of things that we are putting in. And again, we are trying to give ourselves a little bit maneuvering room. So by not announcing exactly everything that we want to put in there, just for the same reason, we need to have the bandwidth or the ability to cut some things if it's necessary. But that said, there's a lot that's going to be in.
One of the changes that you've made since we last spoke and I saw the game is there's been changes to the initiative system. Mm-hmm. Could you talk us through the new version that you have?
So last time we showed it, we had just developed a side initiative system where you had basically, it was either your party and then the enemy, or the enemy and then your core party and maybe another faction. So now it is more of a classic turn order where everybody rolls for initiative, and that basically sets up a sequence in which each participant in combat will get its turn. However, if there are multiple people from your party that are ending up in the same bucket, if you want, you can change the sequence in which you're giving them orders. So you could, for instance, if you have Lysel and Gale and Will, for instance, Will the Warlock, which you didn't see today, and they all ended up next to one another, then you could, for instance, ask Will to go first, do one move, and then you could jump to Lysel, have her do a move, then go back to Will, have him do a move, until they're out of actions, bonus actions, and so forth. And then it would be the next turn, and then like that it continues.
One of the things that I think with a lot of DOS 2 players, this might be their first entry to Baldur's Gate. The environmental and elemental effects are much more muted, but seemingly more important in Baldur's Gate 3.
Yeah, so when we started developing the game, we were looking for ways that we could give players an intuitive sense of how to get advantage in combat. Advantage is a very important concept, as is disadvantage in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. And so the very first one that came to mind was verticality. It's very easy to understand that if you have the high ground, you're going to have an advantage over your enemy. So we started building a world which is full of verticality. So you will see plenty of overhangs and bridges going over stuff and chasms, and you can jump on giant mushrooms and shoot from there. And so there's a lot of ways of getting advantage. And then we added the ability to remove the advantage from an enemy by, for instance, destroying the things on which they're standing. So they could be standing on a bridge and then you can collapse the bridge. Or the demo I gave you, we were walking over spider web, so I could burn that spider web, and then you fell down. So we started doing those things. And then we started looking for other ways that we could do this. And so that's how our light and dark system came to be. So in Dungeons & Dragons, you have these rules around obscurity. Like you could be heavily obscured, you could be lightly obscured. So we started adding that. So if you walk in the shadows, you're lightly obscured. But if you're in a very dark environment, you might be heavily obscured. And then we added things like dark vision, and we might see through that or not. And so all those things started mixing with each other. And then we had an environment in which you can move everything around if it looks like it can be moved around and if you're strong enough. And then we allowed things like if you have a potion, there's a liquid in there and you throw it, that liquid is going to spread, so you start getting surface gameplay. And we put all of that together in one big sandbox, and that allows you as a player, when you're in combat and you have to overcome a challenge, to really use your creativity in trying to figure out how to be victorious, which is today we've been through a couple of fights and we had to be very creative. We failed actually, but we had to be very creative trying to achieve our objective. And there was many things that I could do just by interacting with the environment, using gravity to my advantage, using the objects that were at my disposal to my advantage, throwing things. And that makes for an experience that's very close to what you get when you're playing a tabletop session.
So in terms of the story, obviously when you're playing tabletop, the story that you create and the characters is hugely important. When it comes to your party and the player that you are playing as, what story kind of takes precedent? Are you experiencing them all simultaneously, or is like the lead character's story the one that is the focus?
Well, obviously there's the lead character's story. It's his story or her story, how it starts. But then as you progress through the game, you start meeting companions. Their stories start interweaving with your story. And so progressing from there, you get a very subtle level of storytelling, I think, where everything weaves together as the party journeys together and tries to achieve their goal. And then depending on how the relationships develop, because there's lots of permutations in this game, somebody might betray you, somebody might sacrifice themselves for you, you might sacrifice yourself for someone else. It really depends on where you're going to drive it. And through all of that, the key thing is player agency. So there's lots and lots and lots of choices to be made. And the other thing is also that D20 role, which we made central in the game, where every single time you have to persuade somebody or make an important decision, there's a dice that starts rolling. And you can manipulate it using a mechanic called inspiration points. But the way the dice rolls is going to define how your story progresses. And that makes for an enormous amount of replayability also.
So what options are there for, if I'm not playing as one of the characters that become one of the origin characters, and I want to create my own character, what options are there for crafting my own story?
So the demo I gave you today was actually a custom character. So that was a character that I had created. And that's very similar to what you would get in the player handbook from Dungeons & Dragons. So you get to select your class, select your race, your sub-race, subclass, your background, you get to fool around with your ability points. So you can pretty much select what spells you're going to have, what cantrips, if those are available to you, if you're a cleric, what domain, what gods, all those things are available to you. And then when you start playing, you see that the world is very reactive to who you are, what you picked, what class you are, what race you are, what you have, what proficiencies you have. So all these things come into play, and to be honest, in a way that is much more refined than what we did in, for instance, Original Sin 2, with a lot more permutations, a lot more consequences also to the choices that you make in there.
And when we've some of the stuff we've seen so far in the game, some of the options that you have in dialogue is using the tadpole in your head as you're going through the seromorphosis process. And some of the dialogue hints at things like you start losing. What downsides is the character having to when the tadpole is basically eating its brain?
Yeah, so there is a path towards darkness that you can take, and which means that you start using the powers that the tadpole gives you. Where that leads you, that's something that I'll let you discover for yourselves as you play the game. But it's very much similar to what we had in the original games, that if you take the path of darkness, there are consequences. And advantages, to be honest. It is one of those games where evil is actually being rewarded as a play style. So it can go very far. But then, of course, there's also consequences to all of those actions, which makes it a cool experience.
And when it comes, like you're saying, that things change and the world reacts, and one of the core experiences when you're building a character in D&D is you're thinking about its alignment. But from what I've seen, there's no official alignment chart in Baldur's Gate 3. Is it more that just the world is reacting to each and every decision, and there's much more player agency than just saying, I'm chaotic evil and I do chaotic evil things? It seems like it's shades of grey more than anything.
It is. Although we have added alignment in character creation now, so that is coming. So you will be able to use your alignment, and alignment is having an impact on a whole bunch of little systemics that are present in there. But we don't want to force you down a particular path just because you picked one alignment. So it is in the narrative choices that you're making, you still have the entire range that is at your disposition. Where the alignment and the choices that you make start mattering is in your relationship to your companions and in the relationship of the world towards you. If you do something that is utterly evil and you have somebody in your party that is, for instance, lawful good, you can expect your approval rating to drop dramatically. Whereas if somebody in your party is evil and you're doing something that is evil, and that approval rating might actually increase. So you will see that interaction happen. And
I'm assuming in similar games, there's if the reaction gets too low, if you are being chaotic evil, a paladin might go, you know what, see ya, I'm gonna adventure with someone else. Or are your stories stuck together?
No, might also try to attempt to murder you at night. These things.
Oh, good.
You might wake up with a dagger on your throat if you really piss them off.
Oh, great. I can't. That's something for me to look forward to. So in terms of multiplayer, we know how like some of the NPCs might react. How is multiplayer going to work in Baldur's Gate 3, both from a gameplay standpoint and a narrative standpoint?
So multiplayer, everybody is their own hero. So you each have your personal story, but you live through that story as a party. So the moments that we force you to come together is when you go to camp. Camp is one of our central instruments in the storytelling in BG3. So there's a lot of stuff happening there. I showed you today how you met the devil Raphael, the Cambion Raphael. So he arrived in my camp. I might have actually encountered him in the world also. I might have encountered him during a recruitment moment of a companion or at different locations. But if I would have missed all of those, eventually he would probably show up in camp because he's a central narrative beat, because he wants to offer you a pact, and it's going to be up to you to decide whether or not if you're going to go for that. Or maybe one of your party members or one of your other human players will decide to say, hey, you know what, I'll take the deal. And then you'll say, no, I'm not going to take that deal. And then suddenly you have an interesting situation going on in our camp. So other than that, in multiplayer, it pretty much plays as if you are going to be playing in single player. We can split the party. We can doing all kinds of crazy things all over the world. The others will have to live with the consequences of those decisions. If you decide to kill the leader of a bunch of refugee tieflings, and I promise to help them, well, I'll be there, right? You killed him. I'll have to deal with the fact that he's dead now and the entire camp is in uproar. So these are all things that play as natural as you would expect them to play out. And I think that we learned a lot from Original Sin 2, where we did this we did it for the first time in Original Sin 1, refine it in DOS 2, and I think you'll find the next evolutionary step of storytelling and multiplayer and BG3.
So is there any, or are you ready to talk about the potential of a Dungeon Master mode similar to DOS 2? Is that something you guys are thinking on?
We are thinking about it, but it's not implemented. I mean, like we had to make a very large team to make BG3, and every single one of those people is very, very, very focused and committed, and above all, extremely busy on just making the core experience of the campaign to work. So right now, there's no development being done on any Dungeon Master mode. Not to say that we won't ever do it. I mean, it's literally, we just right now have to make the game work, and it's a very big game. You can do a lot of stuff in this game.
Yes, I've seen many a boots thrown so far. You talked a little about your camp, and in the session we had, there was the potentiality of a gnome joining. How does your camp grow? Is it simply somewhere to sleep and interact with your party, or will there be things like merchants and crafting, or like how big is this camp going to get?
You can acquire quite a lot of camp followers, and these camp followers will start interacting with you and your companions. I think, well, you probably didn't see it, but I showed you a level 3 party. Their camp had actually already grown based on what we showed you originally. So you saw little tents that had appeared there. There was a little cave with candles in there, things that weren't present in at the very beginning of the game, where you just had like a little campfire and that was it. And so the way that is going to grow, well, you'll discover as you play the game.
Obviously, like I said, it's somewhere to rest, and there's the difference between a short rest and a long rest, and if you're familiar with D&D, you might understand that. But for traditional RPG players, can you explain how the rest system works in relation to how your party performs, as well as when it comes to spells? Because Baldur's Gate doesn't have like a traditional mana system, right?
So you get a spell slot system, which has actually been quite a challenge to try to explain to people what spell slots are. So we've done a lot of UI work. I think we're going to be successful with it, but we'll see during early access. And spell slots are essentially a resource that you use, and when you use them up as you cast spells. So you need to sleep to regain them, and depending on what your class is, that can be an easier thing to do or a harder thing to do. And so ultimately you need to rest, take a long rest to restore your entire party so that it has all of its resources again. And so, but because of the way that the world works, and also a little bit how Dungeons and Dragons works, it's not always safe to rest. So there's zones that are unsafe. And so if you're in an unsafe zone, the only thing that's at your disposition is a short rest. And so a short rest doesn't restore everything. And so we have a short rest system and a long rest system. And so when you try to go to the camp and the game says, well, this is a dangerous zone, it's going to say, well, do you want a short rest? Right. And if you can go to camp, then I'll just let you go to camp. Or you could also have just indicated that I just want a short rest. I don't need a long rest right now. So that's how it's done. It's very natural. And then when you go to camp, if the party members have nothing really to tell you, you just fall asleep right away. But if they have something to say to you, you arrive in camp, you see that there's some people that want to talk to you. And so camp moments happen. So it's very smooth, let's put it that way.
This might be something personal to me, but whenever I play D&D, if I find an animal, chances are I'm going to try and charm it and tame it. Is there going to be like pets or animals that you can add to your camp as well? Get a little wolf follower that you managed to...
Yes.
Yeah, stuff like that.
There are animal camp followers. You'll be surprised what type even.
Good. I had to get the pet question in there because DMs everywhere hate me, because if I see a bear, I'm trying to roll a 20 to charm it.
Okay.
that wasn't me like trying to get things out of you or saying, hey, you should add a bear to your game. I promise.
There is an early access. There's an opportunity to take a cup, and it's a kind of bear. It's not exactly a bear.
Oh god. Okay. Well, now you've got the gears turning all over again. So how is your party going to change through the campaign? We saw a lot of party members unfortunately die. Is there a thing like all party members died? Is there like such a thing as permadeath? You spoke a little bit about if your ideologies clash, they can try and kill you or leave. How much can a party change through a campaign? We
basically discern between companions. So these are people that have a full-fledged story. So if they join your party, they will have relationships. You can talk to them. They have different quests that they want you to do, which might be opposing to the quests with other companions have. And then you also have what we call mercenaries. So they don't really have a set story, but they have the advantage that you can say, well, that's exactly the type of character that I want. I want to build it like this. So you basically select who is going to be in your party. If you pick a companion, you get a richer narrative experience. If you want to have more of a mechanical, if you want experience, you'll take a mercenary. They won't have that much to say, but at least you will still be able to continue, even if you pissed off all of your companions because they didn't agree with the choices that you're making. So that's pretty much how it works.
And obviously decision and player agency is enormous in a game like this. Are you going to have like fully divergent paths? Like if you make this choice, this bit like is locked to you, or is there a potentiality to just see everything?
No, it's impossible to see everything. This makes life of our quality assurance team very hard. And in this particular game, it's much more than what we did in our previous games. So right from the get-go, when you're playing and you'll encounter your first quest hub, there's pretty big decisions to be made right there that have consequences across the entire game, and it's very cool to see. I've been playing the particular thing that I have in mind, and so many variations already, and it's every single time it's different, and it's really neat to see the world rotate in function of what I did. So I really see everything change. That's something we didn't do in those two. So that's a big thing. And at the same time, you have the same thing with the characters. Well, you saw that poor gnome that the goblins have attached to a windmill that was turning around. I could have left him there, and then I will never see any of the adventures that continue with him. But if I would have saved him and I would have gone into the Underdark, I will find him back there because he's actually on a quest trying to save his friend. He figured out that his friend is in trouble. And we call him internally, we call him the unfortunate gnome, because it's just one after the other thing goes wrong for him. And then eventually he realized, I'm no hero. So he has a little arc like that. Anyway, I'm telling you too much already. But he has a story that goes all the way into Baldur's Gate, depending whether or not you're going to intersect with his little own adventure that he's trying to do, despite not being a hero.
And more kind of looking very forward into the future. You guys have said in the past that you don't think current gen consoles would be able to run a game as big as Baldur's Gate 3. So do you have aims and aspirations and obviously far-reaching lofty goals for like PS5, Xbox Series X, or are you just thinking, we're going to get it done first, then think about
that? I'm not 100% sure if it wouldn't be able to run on current gen consoles, to be honest. It's just that we haven't tried it. Let's put it that way. But I mean, we managed to get DOS 2 to run on a Switch, which was actually something that we thought was impossible also. So I guess that we're not going to say if anything. Oh. Dave?
Your Deliveroo's here.
My Deliveroo. Right.
I'm leaving this in the interview, by the way.
I would have imagined that you would.
So what you're saying, maybe next gen in the future?
Well, our focus right now is PC and Stadia. And that's a curveball question. So we're going to first focus very hard on getting those two to work, and then we'll see what happens. I mean, like it's a very big game. So we have a lot of work ahead of us. Right now, performance still needs to be heavily optimized, even on PC. So let us first do that.
But the vibe I'm getting, it's while you're handling an old school franchise, what you seem to be aiming for with all the new things you've added and all the player agency, you're aiming for, again, trying to make the next generation of narrative RPGs. That's the vibe I'm getting.
Yeah, I mean, like our ambitions internally for ourselves are very high. There's a huge amount of Dungeons and Dragons players in the office. So they want to get this right. They want to get the feeling that this is a video game adaptation of Dungeons and Dragons. That is something that does source material honor. And our feeling is that we're on the right track. So we, in another interview, I said that we're learning the language of the game. So it took us some time to actually understand the language that it wanted us to speak to it, but we figured it out now. So development right now is actually fairly smooth because we all see this is what we're making. We understand what we're making now. But it takes time to discover that. And so now we're adding a lot of content, cool content with it's very diverse also. So you're not going to see the same thing. You know, there's no repetition of experience, continuously difference. Even every single fight. Well, the fights you saw today, they were all very different, right? So, and they started from simple setups, but evolved in these very complex situations, which is the type of gameplay that we enjoy, and I hope that the players will like also. So there's a lot. But at the core, we're trying to get you the experience that you're playing an adventure, that it's your adventure with reacted to the choices that you make, just like you would do if you're playing Dungeons and Dragons with a good dungeon master.
One of the most exciting things is that you've showed me this game a couple of times now, and you being someone that's so intimately close to it, every time I watch you play it, even you go, oh, I didn't know that. I didn't know I could do that. So if you're saying that, players are going to, I mean, I'm going to lose my mind with all the things that I can experiment with.
Well, this is the beauty of systemic design, right? So what we do is we build systems and we make sure that they interlock with each other. But by now there's so many systems in there that it's a discovery. What can I do with all these systems, right? And so you've seen me try out a few things that didn't work, and then I was upset that they didn't work because I expect them to work, because I trust the game systems. And the lead system designer was sitting next to me, and he's like saying, "Oh, damn it! Why doesn't that work? That should have worked, right?" So, but there's a lot more subtle systems at play also. And like, I was very proud of myself. I mean, we made it so that if you throw a potion and the potion breaks, the fluid comes out, which is logical, what you would expect. And I was very proud of myself that I discovered that if I snuck up in a goblin camp and stood like 10 meters or 30 feet or something above it, and then I threw the potion into a bucket of ale that the goblins were drinking from, they would be poisoned, because they also actually, when they go and drink, that's also a system, and so they absorb the properties of what's inside of there. And so that is it's just neat. It's just very cool. And I mean, like we made a scripted sequence around poisoning the goblins because it was a quest, but the fact that I could do it like this, that was never scripted. That just happened from the systems. And so the same thing you can do at many different locations. I mean, like I'm not 100%. Well, I'll shut up about this one. Because I have a similar thing that is very cool, but I'm not 100% sure if we're going to keep it in. So we'll see.
More secrets. Well, as a huge RPG nerd, I'm so very excited, and I know there's a lot of people out there that's going to be watching this that are just as excited. So obviously, the next time you let me get my greasy eyes on the game, I'll be sharing more with everyone at home. But until then, Sven, thank you so much for joining us, and everyone out there, if you want to see more Baldur's Gate 3, well, subscribe to GameSpot. I'll let you get your Deliveroo now, mate.
Thanks, Dave.